I want to talk for a minute about weight change and commenting on weight change. It's such a common thing to do in our culture, and the more healing that I've done with my own eating disorder and body image work, which I am nowhere near done, that is a Pandora's box if I have ever opened one. The more I'm really seeing how problematic it is, the more I'm learning. And so I talk about this stuff because it helps me. And if anyone out there is struggling in this regard, I hope it can be just a little bit of information and a little bit helpful for you. And then we can all maybe just do a tiny bit better in how we interact with each other in a way that causes less harm. So when we compliment one another's appearance, we're most commonly complimenting a person's adherence to a cultural beauty ideal that's built on the back of oppression. I don't want to take a ton of time in this video to talk about how our beauty ideal is actually deeply sexist and also quite racist. This was a revelation for me this year that really kind of kicked me into high gear with wanting to do this healing work. Like, I no longer want to be complicit in oppression at any level. Of course I still am. I have tons of work to do, but this is one piece of that work that's really important. So I think usually we are trying to be nice. I think the intention is coming from a good place because we're just so indoctrinated into this culture that smaller bodies are better or more beautiful or whatever. And so we think when we comment on somebody's weight loss or when we tell someone how great they look, and what we mean is your body looks great, we're commenting on somebody's ability to conform and comply to a very oppressive system. I don't want to do that. And I don't think most other people actually do either. I think we do a lot of things without realizing some of the deeper background of why. So even though they seem harmless, I think comments like this are pretty dangerous. Here's why I think they're dangerous, and a few things to say instead. Besides the fact that the thin ideal and our beauty ideal is sexist and racist, commenting on weight contributes to weight stigma and anti-fat bias, contributes to disordered eating, to body image dysphoria. It's not really a great thing. It's also oftentimes complimenting somebody going through something really rough. I mean, if you think about the conditions that lead to weight loss, a lot of the time, I have a friend who's going through a rough divorce and her weight has gone down. I know my weight went down when I was very sick with an eating disorder. I have a good friend who tells a story about how when she got the sickest of her life, she came back to college. We were college roommates and got so many compliments because she had lost a bit of weight, quite a bit of weight, because she couldn't keep anything down. And she was so confused why, on the heels of the worst illness she had had in her young life at that time, people cared not at all about the fact that she had been sick, but oh my God, you look so great, you've lost some weight. What does that say about our culture? I don't really like the implications that I read from that. So anyways, if you don't know what weight stigma is, this is an important thing to touch on. It's a cultural phenomenon that causes biased treatment of people based on their body size. And we see this in public spaces with accessibility issues. We see this in private spaces. And we see this really probably most dangerously in healthcare. This is arguably why we see worse health outcomes for people in bodies that have higher BMIs. There's pretty good evidence to show that it's not necessarily the higher BMIs that are contributing to the worst health outcomes, but in fact, the weight stigma that comes along with being in a larger body. So a really tragic example of this is a woman who saw the doctor, I think multiple times, I want to say 4 times, complaining of chest pain. She was in a larger body and shortness of breath. And she was dismissed with the recommendation to lose weight. Turned out that she had lung cancer, and she ended up dying. By the time they diagnosed the cancer, it was too late to treat it. So this is one super tragic example, but you can see how that would play out, similar stories, and maybe even in with less tragic outcomes, but still not great outcomes. So patients seeking medical care are often dismissed. Their complaints go uninvestigated because doctors make assumptions that any issues are due solely to their body size. We believed this kind of, we have this mindset, right? We have even like this idea of obesity as a disease state. It's a body size. It's not a disease state. So that takes a lot to unpack. I don't want to dig into it too deep today, but definitely worth thinking about how people are treated differently in our culture because of their body size. Yeah. Secondly, if you praise a person's low weight or weight loss, like I said, you're praising their ability to conform and comply with an oppressive social norm. That's harmful. Even if the person takes your words as a compliment, it's still reinforcing a really problematic anti-fat bias in them, in you, and in any people who happen to overhear this compliment. Really encourage you to, if you haven't already, find some voices, people in larger bodies. I will include a link. One that I really like is Your Fat Friend, and also I really like Virgie Tovar as well. But there's quite a number of people who live in bigger bodies and talk about this much better than I ever possibly could, because I don't have that lived experience. But reinforcing anti-fat bias hurts you if you're saying it, hurts the person that you're saying it to, even if they take it as a compliment, and hurts anyone who overhears it. What always comes up next for people with this kind of stuff is that there is this concern for health, right? Which you would think that I kind of covered already when we talked about not giving people diagnostic exams, because we just assume that any of their complaints are based on their body size, and then having worse health outcomes, including higher mortality rates, just because we didn't give them the medical treatment that they really needed. So a couple of things to keep in mind when we're talking about health. One, you can't tell how healthy or unhealthy somebody is by looking at them. You just can't. So if you think that you can, that's something that you need to shake free of your head. I cannot tell you the number of times when I got to a weight that people weren't worried that I was on the low end of the spectrum, and suddenly I got comments all the time about how healthy I was and how I must eat so clean. And these comments would come while I was in the midst of the worst of my eating disorder, while I was spending, sometimes, this is like embarrassing to talk about, but sometimes like whole days purging, right? I was anything but healthy. Physically, so wrecked. Mentally, probably even worse. So you can't tell how healthy somebody is by looking at them. That is a crazy assumption. Secondly, it's actually not our business if somebody is healthy or not. It's just not. Unless they choose to share something about their health with you or me or us, it's not our business. I wish somebody would have told that to Jillian Michaels before she thought it was appropriate to comment on other celebrities' supposed health. You can't tell somebody's health by looking at them. You need lab work. You need all kinds of actual data, not just a subjective observation. That's not science, that's not medicine. Next time you're tempted to compliment on somebody's weight loss or their lower body size, I think it is worth it to get curious about why you want to say that. I think a lot of the time we want to make somebody else feel good. And again, if we were to say one of those things, we would be reinforcing a really problematic and oppressive cultural norm. So, a few things to think about saying if you really want to make somebody else feel good or communicate your love for them without just giving them a really short lived little ego boost. I like to hear and I like to say that it's just so great to see you. As simple as that. I know right now with COVID and also with work and time being kind of this weird thing, it can sometimes be hard to get together. And so oftentimes I am just so glad that we can get together if I see a friend or a family member, and I'll say that. If I have time and it's appropriate and we have the bandwidth and the context and the environment for it, I do like to ask, how are you feeling, and genuinely care about listening to their answer. So I think it never hurts to say, it's so great to see you, or I'm so glad we could get together, or I miss you, I love you. I would much rather hear that than you look great, which quite frankly, at this point in my life feels, oh, I know people mean well. So if you've said that to me, thank you. I know you mean well. But I don't feel like, I'm working on feeling more confident in my body, but I don't feel that yet. And it almost feels like it's more upsetting to the people that I'm with that I'm not more there yet with my own like body acceptance and confidence. And so they're trying to make up for my lack of that confidence by telling me how great I look, by insisting that I look great. And it sometimes just feels a little patronizing. That's just my truth. So my bottom line is, like, we all learned at one point in time as kids that it's what's beneath the surface that counts. It's what's inside. So if we really still believe that, let's stop commenting on the surface.